Omega stands before Alpha King at the masked gathering as her hidden scent silences the hall. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Olivia Green stood silently in the center of the grand ballroom, her heart racing. The room was filled with masked faces, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows over the gathering. The air was thick with anticipation, yet no one seemed to notice her. They were all too busy with their own conversations, their own lives. Olivia had always been an outsider in the pack, a rejected Omega with no scent to guide her. In this world, where scent was everything, Olivia was invisible. She had no special aroma to attract an alpha. No alluring fragrance to catch anyone's attention. She was simply forgotten. Yet today, she had been summoned. The masked gathering was a rare occasion, one where all the most important figures from different packs would come together, but Olivia never expected to be part of it. She had hoped to remain in the shadows, unnoticed, but fate had other plans. As she stood there, waiting for something to happen, her pulse quickened. A part of her feared she would be ignored once again, just like every other event in her life. But then, something strange occurred. As Olivia stood still, a soft, unspoken power began to flow from her. Her hidden scent, the one that had never fully formed, suddenly began to surface. It was faint at first, but powerful enough to make an impact. The air around her shifted, and the voices in the room seemed to die down. A curious hush fell over the gathering, the kind that happens when something extraordinary is about to happen. People turned, some in confusion, others in intrigue. Olivia couldn't explain it, but she felt her scent, the one that had always been hidden, slowly filling the air. It was like a quiet storm that had been waiting to be unleashed. And then, from across the room, his gaze met hers. Dante Blackwood, the Alpha King. His icy silver eyes locked onto Olivia with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. He stood tall, his presence commanding and undeniable. Even behind his mask, she could feel the weight of his gaze. The room seemed to hold its breath as Dante began to move toward her, parting the crowd like a powerful force of nature. The other guests stepped back, giving him space as he made his way toward Olivia. She stood frozen, unsure of what to do, but her heart told her to stay still. She wasn't sure what was happening, but she couldn't move. When Dante reached her, he stopped just in front of her, towering over her with his immense presence. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The music faded, the murmurs of the crowd grew distant, and all Olivia could hear was the sound of her own breathing. He stared down at her with those piercing silver eyes, and she could feel his power wrapping around her like a heavy cloak. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, but Dante spoke first, his voice low and commanding. You're the one, he said, his words like a command. Olivia's breath caught in her throat, and for a split second, she wondered if she had misheard him. But no, he was looking at her with undeniable recognition. She was the one. The one who had made the room fall silent. The one who had caught the attention of the Alpha King. And with that, the rest of the gathering seemed to melt away, leaving only Olivia and Dante in the center of the room, surrounded by whispers and stares. Dante's gaze never left hers as he spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of destiny. Your scent is the key, he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. You've been hiding it, but now it's time for the world to know who you are. Olivia's heart raced as she stood there, still in the center of the ballroom, the weight of Dante Blackwood's gaze never leaving her. She had never felt so exposed, so visible in her entire life. The masked gathering had always been an event where power and beauty took center stage, and yet, here she was, a simple Omega who had never been noticed by anyone before. And now, she was standing before the Alpha King, his eyes locked onto hers, the air between them charged with an undeniable force. Olivia could feel the heat rise to her cheeks, but she refused to look away. This moment, this connection, it was impossible to ignore. She had always been invisible in the pack, her scent a flaw that kept her in the shadows, but now, with one glance from Dante, everything had changed. Dante's presence was overwhelming. It was as if the very air shifted when he moved, and his power filled the room, commanding attention from everyone around. His steps were measured, purposeful, and as he approached her, Olivia could feel the intensity of his stare digging deeper into her soul. He stopped just a few feet away, and for a brief moment, neither of them spoke. It was as if the entire world had come to a halt. Olivia's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Why was Dante looking at her like this? Why had he singled her out? She felt the eyes of the entire room on her, the whispers starting to grow louder. She could hear them, faintly, murmuring about the Omega with no scent. She felt a surge of panic rising in her chest, but she pushed it down, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Dante's voice broke through the silence, low and commanding. "You have no idea what you're doing, do you?" he said, his words sending a shiver down her spine. Olivia blinked, unsure of how to respond. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her palms were slick with sweat. I don't understand," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "You think you're just another Omega, one who's been forgotten, unnoticed. But you're more than that. You have power within you, power that even you don't fully understand." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Power? She was just a forgotten Omega with no scent. She had always believed she was nothing more than a burden, an afterthought in the pack. But Dante's words made her feel something she hadn't felt in years: hope. "I've been watching you," Dante continued, his voice smooth and steady. "I've been watching you from afar, ever since you first entered this room. Your scent, hidden for so long, is unlike anything I've ever felt. You have the potential to change everything." Olivia took a step back, her mind reeling. She couldn't process what Dante was saying. It didn't make sense. She was nothing special. She had never been special. "I don't have anything," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm just an Omega. I have no scent, no power." Dante's expression softened, and he took a step closer, closing the distance between them. "That's where you're wrong," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're more powerful than you realize. And I will make sure you understand that, Olivia." His hand reached out, and before she could react, his fingers brushed against her skin, sending a jolt of warmth through her. The touch was electric, and for the first time in her life, Olivia felt something deep inside her stir. She pulled away quickly, not sure what was happening, but Dante's eyes never left her. "You will never be invisible again," he said, his voice low and steady. "You are mine, Olivia. And the world will know it soon enough." The room fell silent once again, and for the first time in her life, Olivia felt something she had never felt before: belonging. The moment Dante's words hung in the air, Olivia felt as though the ground beneath her had shifted. She stood frozen, unable to comprehend the weight of his proclamation. "You are mine, Olivia," he had said, and the intensity in his voice sent a wave of warmth through her, even as confusion and doubt clouded her mind. She could feel the eyes of the entire room on her, but her attention was solely focused on Dante. His silver eyes, glowing with something deep and powerful, were locked onto her, leaving her with no escape, no way to hide from the force of his gaze. The air between them seemed to crackle with energy, and for the first time in her life, Olivia felt like she wasn't invisible. She felt seen, but it was a feeling she wasn't sure she was ready for. "What does that mean?" she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. Dante's lips curved into a smile, one that was both gentle and commanding at the same time. "It means you're no longer just another Omega," he said, his tone firm yet reassuring. "You are my mate, and you have the power to shape the future of this world." Olivia took a step back, the weight of his words pressing down on her. How could he possibly think she was special? She was just a simple Omega, rejected by everyone else. She had no scent, no power, and she certainly wasn't someone worthy of the Alpha King's attention. "I don't understand," she whispered, her heart racing. "I'm not like the other Omegas. I don't have what they have. I don't even have a scent." Dante took a step forward, closing the distance between them, and Olivia's breath hitched. His presence was overwhelming, and the power that radiated from him was undeniable. "Your scent may not be like the others," he said, his voice low and soothing, "but that doesn't mean you're any less worthy. In fact, it means you're something more. You have a power inside of you that you've yet to fully realize." Olivia shook her head, the doubt in her mind only growing stronger. "I don't have any power," she insisted, but Dante only smiled. "You will," he said with confidence. "And I'll be here to help you unlock it." He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, and for the briefest moment, Olivia felt a surge of energy, a warmth that spread through her body. It was like nothing she had ever felt before. She pulled her hand back, her mind racing. What was happening? What did this all mean? Before she could ask another question, the sound of footsteps drew her attention. The room had fallen into a heavy silence, and all eyes were on her and Dante. The guests had stopped whispering, their gazes now fixed on the two of them. Olivia felt the weight of their stares, the pressure of their expectations, but it was Dante who broke the silence. "This is not just about you and me," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "This is about something much bigger. The future of our world depends on what happens next. And I believe you, Olivia, are the key to that future." Olivia's heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment, she felt completely lost. She had always lived in the shadows, unnoticed and unimportant. But now, in this moment, everything was changing. And she didn't know if she was ready for it. "I'm not ready for this," she whispered, her voice shaky. Dante stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to be ready, Olivia," he said softly. "Because this isn't just about you. It's about us. And together, we can face whatever comes next." His words were like a promise, a vow that made something inside her stir. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a place, a purpose. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Dante by her side, she felt a strange sense of hope. She wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, she was more than she had ever believed. The music in the ballroom began to play once again, but for Olivia, it felt like the world had changed forever. She was no longer the forgotten Omega. She was Dante's mate. And that was a future she was finally ready to face. As the evening unfolded, Olivia found herself standing at the edge of the ballroom, her heart still racing from Dante's words. His touch had left a lingering warmth on her skin, and though she tried to ignore it, the reality of what he had said, their bond, began to sink in. She had never imagined her life could change so drastically in such a short time. The room buzzed with quiet conversations, but Olivia felt distant from it all, as if she were now a part of something far greater than herself. Dante's presence still loomed over her, even as he stood talking to a group of influential alphas. His silver eyes occasionally flicked back to her, and each time, she felt the weight of his gaze like a silent promise. He had made it clear that he saw something in her, something that she had never seen in herself. A part of her wanted to believe in his words, to believe that she was special, that she could be more than just the forgotten Omega she had always been. But another part of her, the part that had been hurt and rejected for so long, was hesitant. She had always been told she was nothing, that she would never amount to anything more than a quiet, invisible presence in the pack. Now, standing here, she had to confront that old fear. What if Dante was wrong? What if she wasn't meant for greatness, for the future he spoke of? The soft rustle of the crowd brought her back to the present, and she noticed that Dante was making his way toward her again, his strides purposeful, his expression unreadable. Olivia's heart skipped a beat as he approached, and for a moment, everything else faded away. It was just the two of them in that space, the world outside no longer existing. When Dante reached her, he stopped and held her gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Olivia nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. She felt both overwhelmed and strangely calm at the same time. "I'm just not used to all of this," she confessed softly, her hands trembling slightly. Dante smiled, a small, reassuring smile that seemed to put her at ease. "I know," he said. "This is all new to you, and it's a lot to take in. But trust me, you don't have to do it alone. Olivia met his gaze, the sincerity in his eyes making her heart swell. She wanted to believe him, to trust that everything would be okay. But the doubts still lingered, creeping into her thoughts. How do you know I can handle it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante's expression softened, and he took a step closer. Because I see you, he said simply. I see you for who you are, not just what you've been told you are. His words struck a chord deep within her, and for the first time in her life, Olivia felt like someone truly understood her. It was terrifying, this new feeling of being seen, but it was also liberating. She didn't have to hide anymore. She didn't have to be the invisible Omega who was never good enough. There was more to her, and Dante had seen it. You're not alone, he repeated, his voice unwavering. Not anymore. Olivia swallowed the lump in her throat, feeling the weight of his words. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she might have the strength to face it. She wasn't just Olivia Green, the forgotten Omega. She was something more. And with Dante by her side, maybe just maybe she could begin to believe in her own worth. As the music swelled around them, Olivia found herself standing tall, no longer hiding in the shadows. This was her moment, and for the first time, she was ready to embrace it. The days following Olivia's conversation with Dante felt like a whirlwind. She had always been someone who watched life from the sidelines, never quite able to fully immerse herself in the world around her. But now, everything had changed. The Alpha King had seen her, acknowledged her, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. Olivia's thoughts were clouded with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. She had always believed that her lack of ascent, her weakness as an Omega, made her less than others. But Dante had insisted that she had power within her, a strength that even she had not yet discovered. And as much as she wanted to believe him, she couldn't help but wonder if she was truly capable of the greatness he spoke of. The ballroom, once a place of overwhelming fear and isolation for Olivia, had become a place of change. She no longer stood in the corners, hoping to remain unnoticed. Instead, she walked through the crowd with a newfound sense of purpose, the eyes of the pack members occasionally flicking to her in curiosity. Olivia felt their gazes, but they no longer carried the same weight. She wasn't the girl who was invisible anymore. She was someone important, even if she wasn't entirely sure why yet. Dante, for his part, seemed to watch over her constantly. He was always nearby, a silent protector who never left her side for too long. His presence was reassuring, but it also made her feel exposed, as if he could see straight through her every thought and insecurity. Yet, with every moment spent in his company, Olivia began to feel more at ease with herself, more willing to accept the possibilities that lay ahead. One evening, as the full moon cast its glow over the pack's territory, Olivia stood by the large windows of the palace, looking out over the sprawling forest. The moon had always been a symbol of destiny in their world, a reminder of the bond between Alpha and Omega. It was fitting, Olivia thought, that she was standing here now, in a place she never imagined she would be, with Dante watching over her. He approached her quietly, his footsteps almost silent on the marble floor. She didn't need to turn to. No, he was there. She could feel his presence, the weight of his gaze. Are you all right? Dante's voice was soft, but there was a strength behind it that she couldn't ignore. Olivia nodded slowly, her eyes still fixed on the moonlit landscape outside. I'm just trying to make sense of everything, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I never thought I'd be here, with you. With everything that's happening. Dante stepped closer, his hand gently brushing against her shoulder in a comforting gesture. You don't have to have all the answers right now, he said, his tone reassuring. What matters is that you're here, with me. And together, we will figure it out. Olivia turned to face him, her heart beating faster as their eyes locked. The connection between them was undeniable, a bond that she hadn't fully understood until now. I'm not sure I'm ready for everything that's coming, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I've spent my whole life thinking I wasn't good enough, that I didn't have what it takes. Dante smiled gently, his hand cupping her cheek in a tender gesture. You've always been enough, Olivia, he said, his voice filled with warmth. And together, we will discover the strength within you. You're not just an Omega anymore. You're my mate. And that's all that matters. His words, filled with conviction and tenderness, settled over her like a blanket, and for the first time in her life, Olivia felt like she truly belonged. She wasn't just a forgotten, invisible Omega. She was Dante's mate, and together, they would face whatever the future held. She didn't know what that future would look like, but she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't alone anymore. And that, in itself, was more than she had ever hoped for. The days continued to pass in a haze of new experiences and emotions for Olivia. The palace, once an intimidating and cold place, had started to feel like home. Her confidence grew slowly, nurtured by Dante's constant presence and the soft assurances he offered. Olivia was no longer the quiet, invisible Omega she had been in her old life. She was someone new now, someone with a future that stretched out before her, a future she had never thought possible. Despite this, there was still uncertainty inside her. The realization that she was Dante's mate, the Alpha King, weighed heavily on her. She had never known a life of such power and responsibility. She had always lived in the shadows, and now, she was thrust into the spotlight. The fear of failure haunted her. She didn't know if she could truly live up to the expectations that came with being the Alpha King's mate. Every day, Olivia found herself facing the other members of the pack, those who had once ignored her, now looking at her with curiosity and respect. She could feel their gazes, but for once, they didn't feel like judgment. Instead, they felt like expectation. It was a heavy burden, one she wasn't sure she was ready to bear. Dante, however, never seemed to falter. He was always there, a steady presence by her side, giving her the strength to face the unknown. One afternoon, as they walked through the palace gardens, Dante turned to her with that same gentle smile he always wore. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice soft and kind. Olivia looked up at him, her thoughts racing. "I don't know," she confessed, her voice full of uncertainty. "I feel like everything is moving so fast. I'm not sure I can keep up with all of this." Dante's hand gently cupped her cheek, tilting her face toward his. His silver eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, Olivia felt like she was the only person in the world. "You don't have to keep up, Olivia," he said, his voice unwavering. "You just have to be yourself. That's all I need from you." Olivia's heart swelled at his words. His faith in her, his belief in her strength, was something she had never experienced before. It was both comforting and terrifying. She had always been told she was not enough, that she would never amount to anything. But now, standing here with Dante, she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was enough. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the garden. Dante led Olivia to a bench beneath a tall oak tree, its branches heavy with blossoms. As they sat, he took her hand in his fingers warm against her skin. "I know this is a lot," he said, his voice soft but steady. "But I also know you are capable of more than you think. You are strong, Olivia. And I will be here every step of the way, to help you see that." Olivia looked down at their hands, her fingers lightly tracing the back of his. The weight of his words settled over her like a comforting blanket. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged. She wasn't just a discarded Omega anymore. She was part of something greater. She was part of Dante's world, and he was part of hers. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "For believing in me." Dante smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I don't just believe in you, Olivia," he said, his voice filled with quiet confidence. "I know you." And in that moment, Olivia knew no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with Dante by her side. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to have all the answers. All she had to do was trust in herself, and in the bond they shared. The rest would come in time. Olivia walked through the palace halls, her mind a whirl of thoughts. She had spent so much of her life hiding in the shadows, never believing she was worthy of anything more than the life she had known. But now, everything was changing. Dante's words echoed in her mind, filling her with both hope and uncertainty. She was not the same person she had been when she first arrived at the palace. She had been seen, recognized, and now, she was Dante's mate. It was a lot to process. The bond they shared was unlike anything she had ever experienced, but as much as she wanted to believe in it, a small voice of doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. Could she truly live up to the expectations of being the Alpha King's mate? Could she be the one to stand beside him, to face the challenges of the future together? Olivia paused as she reached a balcony overlooking the sprawling gardens below. The evening sky was painted with hues of pink and orange, the setting sun casting a soft glow over the grounds. She inhaled deeply, feeling the cool breeze against her skin. This was her world now, a world of power, responsibility, and love. But she still wasn't sure she was ready for it. As she leaned against the railing, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to find Dante approaching, his presence commanding yet comforting. His silver eyes met hers, and she felt her heart skip a beat. "Olivia," he said softly, his voice carrying across the space between them. "Are you all right?" She smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm just thinking," she replied, her voice filled with uncertainty. "About everything. About what comes next." Dante stepped closer, his hand gently resting on the railing beside hers. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," he said, his tone reassuring. "We'll figure it out together, every step of the way." Olivia looked up at him, meeting his gaze. There was so much weight in his words, so much trust. He believed in her. But the question remained, did she believe in herself? "I'm scared," she admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Scared that I won't be enough. Scared that I'll let you down." Dante reached out, taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, steady, and it grounded her in a way she hadn't expected. "Olivia, you are more than enough," he said firmly. "You've always been enough. And I will never ask you to be anything other than who you are. Together, we are stronger than we could ever be alone." The sincerity in his words wrapped around her like a protective shield. She felt the weight of her doubts begin to lift, if only for a moment. "I don't know if I can do this," she confessed, her voice trembling. "What if I fail?" Dante gently squeezed her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "Failure is a part of life," he said softly. "But it's how we rise from it that defines us. You don't have to be perfect, Olivia. You just have to be willing to try." Olivia's heart swelled at his words. She wasn't sure what the future held, but with Dante by her side, she felt like she could face whatever came next. She wasn't alone anymore. "Thank you," she whispered, the gratitude in her voice clear. Dante smiled, his gaze softening. "There's nothing to thank me for," he said. "This is just the beginning of our journey, Olivia. And no matter what happens, I will always be by your side." For the first time since she had arrived at the palace, Olivia felt a sense of peace settle over her. She didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need to be perfect. All she had to do was trust in herself, in Dante, and in the bond they shared. As they stood together on the balcony, watching the last rays of sunlight fade into the horizon, Olivia realized that the future was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace, something to face with courage, love, and the strength that Dante had shown her all along. Olivia had never felt the weight of silence quite like she did now. The weight of expectations, of a future that was still so unclear to her. The halls of the palace were still unfamiliar, even after all this time, and yet she was no longer the same person who had arrived. She was stronger, more certain of herself, and yet the fear still lingered at the edges of her thoughts. As the days passed, Dante continued to be by her side, guiding her through every new step, supporting her in ways she never thought possible. He had become more than just her mate, he was her anchor, the one constant in a world that was anything but predictable. Yet, as the future loomed before them, Olivia still felt uncertain. She had been raised to believe that she was invisible, that she was nothing more than an omega, a being meant to serve and be seen but never truly valued. But now, standing in the palace, surrounded by power and responsibility, she had to ask herself if she could truly rise to the challenge. Could she be the mate the Alpha King needed? Could she stand beside him as his equal, as a queen? The question haunted her, and no matter how much Dante tried to reassure her, it was a question she couldn't ignore. One evening, as the palace buzzed with the preparation for an upcoming council meeting, Olivia found herself wandering the quiet corridors. She didn't know where she was going, but she needed to be alone with her thoughts. The palace was filled with servants and advisors, all rushing to complete their tasks, but Olivia found a strange comfort in the solitude of the empty halls. She passed by ornate tapestries and gleaming marble floors, the light from the chandeliers casting long shadows along the walls. The palace was beautiful, no doubt. But to Olivia, it felt like a reminder of the world she was now a part of, a world she wasn't sure she belonged in. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned, her heart racing, and saw Dante approaching. As always, he moved with a grace that was both commanding and effortless. His presence filled the space, and for a moment, Olivia felt her worries fade. "Olivia," Dante said, his voice calm and steady, as always. "What are you doing out here alone?" She gave him a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just thinking," she replied, her voice betraying the uncertainty that still lingered within her. "About everything. About what comes next." Dante stopped in front of her, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made Olivia's heart skip a beat. "You don't have to have it all figured out right now," he said softly, his hand reaching out to gently touch her arm. "You're not alone in this. We will face it together." Olivia swallowed hard, the words she had been holding back finally spilling out. "I'm scared, Dante," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Scared that I won't be able to live up to everything you need from me. Scared that I'll disappoint you." Dante's expression softened, and he stepped closer, his hand finding hers. "Olivia," he said firmly, his voice filled with conviction, "you could never disappoint me. You are more than enough just as you are. And I will always stand by you, no matter what." His words settled over her like a blanket, warm and comforting. For the first time in weeks, Olivia felt the weight of her fears begin to lift. She wasn't alone in this. She had Dante, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing his hand. Dante smiled, his gaze never leaving hers. "You don't have to thank me. This is what I've always wanted, this future with you." Olivia's heart swelled with a mix of emotions, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be everything Dante saw in her. The future was still uncertain, but with him by her side, it felt like something she could face. She wasn't just the Omega who had been forgotten anymore. She was Olivia, Dante's mate, and together, they would carve their own path. And as the night stretched on, the palace that once seemed so cold and imposing now felt like a place she could call home. As Olivia stood beside Dante, the weight of their shared future began to sink in. The days had been a whirlwind of change, and yet, despite the uncertainty that still lingered, she found a sense of peace in the moments they shared together. The palace, once an intimidating labyrinth of corridors and opulence, had slowly begun to feel like a place she could call home. The transformation wasn't just in the walls and floors of the grand estate, it was in herself. She was no longer the Omega who had been overlooked and pushed aside. She had a place now. And with that, the quiet fears that had haunted her began to fade, replaced with a spark of hope she had never dared to acknowledge before. She was ready to embrace the future, not just as the Alpha King's mate, but as herself. Dante stood tall beside her, his hand gently resting on the small of her back. His presence was a constant reassurance, a steady force that anchored her in ways she couldn't explain. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low and warm. Olivia looked up at him, meeting his silver gaze. She didn't need to speak. He had known her long enough now to understand her, to know that her quiet moments were just as telling as her words. He knew she was ready. And so, with a deep breath, she nodded. "I'm ready." The day had arrived. The council meeting that would change everything was about to begin. The weight of the responsibility that came with being a ruler, the partner of the Alpha King, was not lost on Olivia. She had spent so much time wondering if she was enough, if she could rise to the occasion. But now, standing by Dante's side, she felt something shift inside of her. This wasn't just about what she could give to him, it was about what they could build together. The council room was filled with influential pack leaders, each one watching with keen eyes as Dante and Olivia entered. The murmurs of conversation faded into silence as all eyes turned toward them. Olivia could feel the weight of their gazes, but it didn't faze her. She stood tall, her posture straight, her confidence bolstered by the presence of the man beside her. Dante, for his part, exuded quiet authority. His presence was commanding, but his focus remained on Olivia, as if her strength mattered just as much as his. As they took their seats at the head of the table, the murmurs started again, but this time, they were different. There was respect in the air. The room no longer felt like a space of judgment, but one of unity. The tension that had once filled Olivia's chest melted away, replaced with a quiet determination. As Dante began the meeting, his voice strong and clear, Olivia watched him with a sense of awe. She had always admired him from afar, but now, as his equal, she understood the weight of his role and the strength it took to carry it. And yet, through it all, he never wavered. He was the Alpha King, but he was also hers. "We stand at the crossroads of a new era," Dante's voice resonated through the room, his words carrying the weight of their shared responsibility. "Together, we will face whatever challenges come our way." As the meeting continued, Olivia listened intently, absorbing everything she could. Her role, though still new, was clear to her now. She wasn't just a figurehead. She had a voice, and that voice mattered. By the time the council meeting came to an end, Olivia felt a sense of pride in herself that she had never experienced before. She was no longer just the girl who had been overlooked. She was the mate of the Alpha King, and together, they would shape the future. As the leaders filed out of the room, Dante turned to Olivia, his silver eyes softening as they locked onto hers. "You did well today," he said, his words full of pride. Olivia smiled, feeling the truth of his words deep within her. "We did well," she replied, her voice steady. For the first time, Olivia realized that she didn't have to carry the burden of responsibility alone. With Dante by her side, she was more than enough. And as they left the council room, side by side, Olivia felt something deep within her stir, a sense of purpose, of belonging. This was only the beginning, but she was ready. Together, they would face whatever came next.